You're visiting the Mom Next Door and our stories of faith. I'm glad you dropped by for a visit. Please stay a while and hear what the Lord has done in the lives of moms just like you and me. Merry Christmas morning, my friends. How are you doing this morning? Did you get up real early or did you just get to sleep in a little bit? I think today we're going to do something really different here. I'm going to go it alone on this podcast, and that's something I have not really done yet. I know one time I had my friend Sonia on to interview me to maybe give you a little bit of a glimpse into my life and who I am. It's a little hard to just sit here alone and record something without that feedback of another person. But I'm going to give it a shot because, I feel like the Lord is always taking me to new places, challenging me and bringing me to something new. And I hope that in your life, you are continually being challenged and sharpened to go deeper and to grow more. That's so good for ourselves and also for our children to see us growing and learning. And there's just so many good things that await us as we keep following the Lord and walking in Him. I feel like I learn so much from other people. And when I talk to other moms and share with them, listen to what they're doing, I find things that are applicable to my life, things that I can add in. Now, we don't want to replicate someone else's life at all, but there are always little tidbits we can learn as we go along. So I was thinking today it might be fun to just share with you the ways that our family celebrates Christmas. And part of that is actually going all the way back to the beginning of the month of December. I wrote a little article on my blog post about this, and so I should probably link that in. So if you want to get actual details and visualize what I'm talking about, then I'll send you there. But many years ago, when we were fairly new parents, the pastor's wife at our church sat the ladies group down and she did a craft day. She told us about a little project they did in their family called the waiting tree. And the waiting tree is kind of like an Advent calendar. We started on December 1st, and every day we do a little reading. And the readings start at creation, and they go all the way through the birth of Christ. And so there's this little felt tree that we put up on our wall. And then every day as we read each story from the Bible, from creation to the birth of Christ, there's a little symbol that correlates with that story. And so starting on December 1st, we gather our children around and we read that story. We sing a hymn, like a Christmas hymn, and we practice saying Luke 2, verses 1 through 20. And I'll get to that a little bit more as to how we apply that. But this waiting tree was a very foundational point in our lives. Before we had heard about the waiting tree, we really didn't have a good pattern for family devotions. But when we brought that craft home, I hung that tree on the wall and we sat down with our children and tangibly put up these little symbols for each story each day. It created a pattern and we enjoyed that time. We started a tradition, which then carried out actually through the rest of the year with other topics, but we didn't always have like the felt tree or anything like that. But we were challenged that sitting down for the month of December and spending time with the family, reading the Word of God. When everybody was so little, we wondered if that was actually possible and everybody's bouncing around. But through practicing the waiting tree, we found that it was. So let's see. I wonder how scattered I am in that and how much I'm staying on topic with you ladies here. So anyway, so starting December 1st, we do the waiting tree. That carries us all the way through Christmas morning. That is one way that we celebrate the birth of Christ, is learning more about him, digging into his word, and singing also the songs of faith, the Christian hymns related to the birth of Christ. Another thing that we do is we celebrate St. Nicholas Day. Okay, I grew up Santa Claus and all the normal traditional American Christmas stuff. But when I became a mom, I really wondered, do we want to do Santa Claus or do we not want to do Santa Claus? And I kind of didn't want my children to miss out on some of that. But I also really wondered, where did that fit in with my faith? Now, someone had given me a book when we first got married called Celebrating the Christian Year by Martha Zimmerman. And it is out of print, but you still can find it if you are a creative shopper, I guess we'd say. So anyway, in that book, they talked about St. Nicholas Day. I had never really heard of St. Nicholas Day as some sort of a celebration before, but I was really curious what that would look like for our family. And so I started to figure out who St. Nicholas was. And of course, we know that Santa Claus is the caricature, and what we know of him was actually based on a real person. But I think sometimes we miss out on who that real person is when we just focused on the character that is so commonly thrown out there today. And so what we have done is we take a step back and we look at the historical St. Nicholas. And there are so many other little storybooks out there now about that. But typically so we start the waiting tree December 1st, and then the next thing my children are anticipating is St. Nicholas Day, which is typically celebrated on December 6th or 7th. There's some question out there I've heard of when is the actual day. And then I can't remember because it's been so many years since we started it. Are we celebrating the day that St. Nicholas was born or the day that he passed away? But anyway, his life. We celebrate his life. And St. Nicholas was a real man who loved God. And the things that he did were as a response to that deep love for God. He did provide clothing for people in need. He provided food for people in need. And there is a story that there were some young girls who needed to have money for a dowry, and their family was not able to pay for their dowry, so they couldn't get married. But Nicholas was able to give them some money, but he wanted to do it anonymously. And so one night, while everybody's asleep, in the town, he goes and tosses some gold coins through the windows of this family, and they happen to fall in the girls' stockings that were hung by the window to dry. And so, so this, again, I'm so sorry if it's scattered, but so we celebrate St. Nicholas Day by filling a stocking, and our children get to open their stockings early on St. Nicholas Day, and in it includes some of those chocolate gold coins and a food item and a clothing item, usually like a pair of socks or a pair of gloves or something like that, and a personal hygiene item, and then like a toothbrush or a hairbrush or some hair clips or something like that, maybe chapstick, and then some sort of a toy. Nicholas cared for people. He cared for their needs. He cared for children, and he wanted to bless them. And so those are some of the practical places that he would bless people. And so on St. Nicholas Day, we read the story of who St. Nicholas was historically. And then we give our children the stockings that they get to open up, and it's very simple, and they kind of have a clue of what might be in their stockings each year, because I do use that traditional kind of list of things. There's some variety. Nicholas would have probably given the children things like oranges or, fruit, nuts, food like that. And in the early years when we did stockings, I did actually put those things in my children's stocking, but they were not real excited about getting an orange because, those were available most days on the counter in the kitchen. So what we do now as our family tradition is the food item is actually a can of Pringles. You know, in a big family, how exciting it is to have your own can of Pringles. And so that is the food item in our St. Nicholas Day stocking. Another part of our celebrations throughout the month of December, and actually it starts at Advent, is reading through the series of books that one of them is called Jotham's Journey. Another one is Tabitha's Travels, Bartholomew's Passage, and I think there's one more. Anyway, it's a series, I think 4 books, and you choose one each year. This year we are reading Tabitha's Travels, and I love this set of books. Even if you have older children, teenagers, young children, they're all going to love reading this series of books. So there's a reading for each day, and you're going on an adventure. And each day's reading ends with a cliffhanger and an application to how we can use some of those same principles that we read about in our life today. But this journey that you're going on in these stories is set in Bible times, and it leads up to the birth of Christ. So if you're looking for resources, I would highly recommend checking those out. And you don't need the whole set to start. You're only going to read one each year, but start with Jotham's Journey. And if you love it, the next year, add a different one. And we are in this 4-year rotation now. And even when we go back and listen to one of the ones that we have read before so many times, everybody is just on the edge of their seat. Read me another day, read another day. But we don't. We just do one reading a day, along with some of the other things that we do. So what about gifts? How do you give gifts in your family? Everybody does it different. And we've chosen to be fairly intentional about our gift giving. Now, when we first had children, it was just so fun to just buy things all year round. I would find sales throughout the year, but then inevitably I would lose the gifts. I could not remember where I put them, or they wouldn't even apply anymore. Maybe something I bought for my child in January or February on a great sale, by the time Christmas rolled around again, it wasn't really their thing. And so we've stepped off that a little bit, and instead of a quantity of gifts, we will be very intentional. Everything that I choose to give my children, I hope will be something that will point them to the Lord, that will remind them who He is, encourage them in their walk with Him. I have one friend who said that they always give their children 3 gifts, referring to the 3 gifts that the wise men brought. Also, I know some people who do things like something to do, something to read, something fun. Another thing we do, because we do have 9 children, we don't encourage our children to all buy gifts for each other. That would be madness in getting it done, and it would cause extreme craziness the day of actually opening the gifts. So we actually do a secret sibling drawing at the beginning of, around Thanksgiving or so. We pull names out of a hat, and we assign by that way secret siblings. And sometimes they're not so secret. It just kind of depends. It makes it kind of fun to have this challenge throughout the year to try to trick each other and keep who's really my sibling and who's not. And when they slip up and actually say who their sibling was and they don't want to, then they have to do a little oh, why did they say that? So that's kind of fun. And sometimes my children do gifts for every single person in the family. But often what that looks like is a toy that they've pulled out of their closet, a picture they've drawn for each other. And there's been quite a few times when someone in my house has unwrapped an apple or a piece of food that someone has scurried away and put wrapping around. It's so much fun. It's fun to have our kids study each other, because they know that they're going to give that one a gift. And so anyway, it's just a lot of fun. Another thing that I do in keeping track and juggling with so many, I tend to be forgetful. And so many years ago, I put together a little survey, and it asked questions like, what is your favorite color? What is your favorite candy? What kind of music do you like? Anyway, just all sorts of questions that will help me bless them when they open up their gifts. I would really hate to have confused it in my mind and think, somebody's favorite animal was pandas. And so I bought them a sweatshirt with a panda on it. And then I find out later and they say, Mom, I really don't like pandas. I really like giraffes or something. So anyway, I tried to do this survey, and then as I have them fill it out, it's super cute to go back and look at what they wrote on their survey, 8 years ago or something, with their handwriting. So those are a cute memory for me, and I always save those. It allows me to be intentional, very intentional with my gift giving, and I don't feel like I have to give them so many things too, because I know that what I picked out was something that they will enjoy. This is also a great place to keep track of what sizes each person is wearing that current year, because I do keep these with me when I go shopping. Now, as they've gotten older, I've revised the survey a little bit. And now I've added on, like, what is your favorite verse? Do you have a verse that has really spoken to you this year? Is there something that God has just taught you that you can tell us about? Is there a way that he's growing in your life? And then also, what can I pray for you about this year? And that has been a fantastic tool, as when I copy those surveys out, I mail them to the grandmas, and so they will get a glimpse into each grandchild's life. And also, I send them to the sibling to sibling, which is a great way to stay connected. Maybe now I have children living in, 3 different states. And so it is a great way to keep them a little connected and aware of what's going on in their sibling's life, even though they're not living with them day to day. So that's just another fun resource. And then also, when we first became parents, well, not when we first became, when our children started becoming mobile, I'll say that, I was like, do we wrap our gifts ahead of time and keep them under the tree throughout the season? Do we keep them hidden and bring them out? What does that look like in our family? Though it might be easy to just pile them under the tree as I wrap them, I do get a little scattered, and it was easier to just, and we had toddlers that would pull them and wander off with them to a different room, and we didn't want to lose them. So what we did was, as I would wrap gifts, I'd keep them hidden, usually in my closet in a cardboard box or a Rubbermaid tote. And so then I always kind of could keep track. And of course, I had my lists going, as all moms probably do. One of our friends told us a story that when they were growing up, their parents had a blue blanket. And each year on Christmas Eve, their parents would spread out across the rafters, or whatever you call it, in the doorway, this blue blanket. And Christmas morning, they knew that no matter how early they woke up, they were not allowed to cross that blue blanket until Mom and Dad were ready. That was a great idea for us. And it allowed us to enter into our Christmas morning a little differently, a little slower. We have never woken up to our children having opened presents before we got there. I know that's happened to a few people, am I right? So we took this idea that our friends had, and we just found any old blanket, and we hung it across the doorway where our Christmas tree was. And after everyone was asleep, Christmas Eve, we would put all the presents underneath the tree and put up that blanket. And Christmas morning, we would lay out another set of stockings. And the first set of stockings was traditional St. Nicholas Day stockings on December 6th, 7th, whatever worked on our family schedule to do right around that date. But Christmas morning stockings were kind of breakfast stockings. And so though we did put candy in it, and my husband was in charge of those, has always been in charge of Christmas morning stockings for the most part. So it's fun candy. It's not, it's not practical candy like mom would buy, right? It's the fun stuff. And also in there, we had breakfast items. We would maybe put a fun individual sparkling cider, maybe those tiny boxes of cereal, dried fruit, things like that. So Christmas morning, our children wake up and they will find their stockings, which is also their breakfast, which allows my husband and I to get up a little bit more leisurely, and we will get to go take our showers, make a cup of coffee. We might even make some bacon, cook some eggs. My husband makes a French toast every Christmas morning. And so by putting that barrier up, it allowed us to just start our mornings a little slower. And then we also are able to gather in front of that blanket and sit down and finish out the last day of reading for the waiting tree, the last day of reading for that Jotham's Journey, whichever book we're in. And then when we are done and when we are ready, then we pull back the curtain and everybody runs in and we're able to start the gift giving. So that might be a practical tip if some people are kind of wondering what this looks like. Now, I really think that every family is going to make it their own, and I'm not so sure you can mess up on this, right? It is what the memories that you create with every foible and every different way we do it. Those are the memories that are precious for your family. I just know that sometimes as we think through this, maybe some families are starting out or trying to think of different ways. I love hearing how different families communicate and how they put things out practically, because I might just be a point at my life in our home where we want to change things up a little bit. We want to look at new ways to do things. Sometimes years we add in, some years we keep things the same. And I was thinking about this even in like Christmas lights and Christmas cookies. Some years we pile in the car and we drive around the neighborhoods with lots of lights, but we don't always do it every year. It doesn't always work. Some years we go to some performances and concerts. Some years we don't. We know that food is a big part of the celebration. And what I've chosen to do is each one of my children each year gets to pick a treat to make with me. Some of the treats are simpler. The youngest ones, I would always try to choose just simply something that needed to get melted. And so we'd get the little chocolates that, like the white chocolates that you melt in the microwave and mix in some peppermint and lay it out in a pan. And this, my little boys always loved, because after it cooled in the pan, their job was to bash it up into tiny pieces, bite-sized pieces. And they loved doing those type of cooking adventures where they got to break up the peanut brittle or break up any of those things. And then things like sugar cookies, that was something that took a little more time and I needed to schedule a little differently. But each child got to choose what was their favorite treat to make over the season. And I would try to find time to make that with each of them. Now, as they got older, sometimes they'd just go into the kitchen and they'd say, hey, I'm going to do my Christmas cookie on my own, and I'm just going to do it today. And sometimes I'd be able to work with them on it, and sometimes I wouldn't. Even now, as adults, now we have some traveling home to be with us for Christmas. And I'm like, well, what treat do you want me to have ready for you? What's your one thing that you would like to see when you come home at Christmas? I think so many times there's so much to do and it overwhelms us. But if we can create that if we can accomplish that as part of the relationship building, then it makes it much more doable. So those are some things we do throughout the holiday season. But I have to say, my most favorite part is a tradition that is brought in by my husband's family. So the week before Christmas, The Fields family would gather, and sometimes it would be 70, I think over 100 sometimes. And it just depends again on seasons, on weather, on who lives close. And we would all meet at my mother-in-law and father-in-law's house. It would start with a big bowl of stew that my mother-in-law would make. So she would make the main course, the stew, and then everyone else would bring sides and desserts, finger foods, things like that. So we would gather and eat and then fellowship for quite a while. Then it was time to go sit down and sing. So we always gather around, children included. We sing the Christmas songs of faith. It's kind of fun because how many times do you know like the first and second verse of Away in the Manger? But do you know how many verses there are? So many Christmas carols. There's a lot of verses too. Well, we had a lot of people meeting. And so what we would do is we would go around the room and each person would do, like if you said Away in the Manger, you'd sing that first verse of Away in the Manger. And then somebody else, the next person might choose Go Tell It on the Mountain. And you do the first verse of that. And then the next one was, We Three Kings. One of the favorite one is the Little Drummer Boy, and everybody loves that. Lots of fun in that. So you just do the first verse. And then by the time you're getting a little further in this group of lots of people, we would then start going into the second verse of something. And then if you were still going, we'd get into the third verse. So if you didn't have that many people in your group, you might actually sing the whole song through. But we had so many and we wanted everybody to be able to choose. So each person would choose a single verse. We would always keep Silent Night until the very end. That would always be our closing song. And we only did the songs of faith. We did not sing the songs about Rudolph or St. Nicholas. It has always been a time to focus on Christ and to focus on his birth. And you'd be amazed how many songs have been made that we don't even hear anymore. So it's a great time to just dig those out. After we sing the songs, and this for our family could go on for a couple hours, then we recite Luke 2 in the King James Version. Again, this is a tradition that started decades ago in my husband's family. He grew up always quoting Luke 2, verses 1 through 20 from the King James Version. And so when we became parents, we started doing that with our children too. And as a preparation to go to this gathering with the family, every night in the month of December, we would read through those verses. And I was amazed. I think our daughter was 3 when she had those 20 verses memorized. And honestly, most of my children have had those memorized before they were grade school age. It is something where that repetitiveness, 20 days, 23 days, however many days it is until that meeting that we do, they were reading it every day. So part of our evening routine, the waiting tree, Jotham's Journey, singing Christmas carols, and then also quoting Luke 2, or at least us reading to it, and the children would each throw in a word as they were memorizing it, and each week, each day, they'd get a little stronger and a little stronger, and they would remember those verses. Now, though the aunts and uncles might call this meeting for Christmas Eve, my children call it basket night. So as we now are in Tennessee and we are establishing new friendships and new traditions, and we don't have our family as much here, not our extended family at least, we actually have hosted this year a basket night, and we called it that. So I'm going to tell you how this goes because it is so much fun. When we're done with the reading of scripture and the songs, all the aunties would go and they would pick up a little basket that they had prepared to bring. Often there was a basket for children and then a basket for adults. In it were things like, for the adults, sometimes like a little bag of nuts, then a little Ziploc bag, maybe a bookmark that they had made, maybe prayer cards for the families that were missionaries. We had a lot of family that did mission work. Maybe it would be a little kitchen towel or a chocolate bar. So that was often the adults' baskets. Now, the children's baskets might have things like a glow stick or a candy cane. Occasionally, one of the aunts would roll up $1 bills and tie them with a ribbon, little slap bracelets, squishy, like fidget toys, things that we could get from inexpensive bulk places was often what we did. And very generic because we never knew exactly who would be at this Christmas Eve party. And often it wasn't just the family, but we would invite other people from around too to join in. And so that was a highlight for my children, going to basket night after we had finished sitting still for so long to sing and to read and quote and listen to stories. Often the aunts and uncles, in between songs, they might share a memory of their past, memories of their parents who most of us had never met, of the younger generation anyway. So when we finished, going up to each of those aunts and seeing what was in their basket was so exciting. I don't know how you are going to celebrate Christmas this year, and I would love to hear more about how each one of you does. But whatever you do, may your traditions and celebrations point to Jesus. May we as parents plant seeds of faith in our children that will carry them on into their adulthood and into their own parenting years. God bless you on this Christmas day. Lord, I thank you for these families. Lord, I thank you that you have given us families that we can nurture, that we can have around us to comfort us and to grow with us and to learn more about you. Lord, I pray that these families right now would remember that you are the reason for this season, that you are the reason why we gather, why we celebrate, why we give gifts to each other. Lord, I thank you for sending your Son to come to earth, to save mankind, and to bring us to a better life. Lord, thank you that your saving grace is not just someday out, but you save us daily from so many things. You are always growing in us and working in us. Lord, I thank you for that. I thank you for being here with us on this Christmas day. In Jesus' name, amen. I hope that you've been encouraged or challenged in your faith today, and that something we discussed prompts you to grow deeper in your walk with the Lord. If it has, make sure you tell a friend so they can grow along with you. And if you or a friend would like to be a guest and share about God's faithfulness in your life, please email me at podcast@tendingfields.net. Because when we tell of God's faithfulness, we never run out of stories.
Whatever is true.